I'd like to talk about what I call the witch wound, or the persecution complex. That's what I've been calling it because it's very tied to current and simultaneous, also known as past lives, where we experience persecution for our psychic gifts, for our unusual nature, for the fact that our natural, very authentic way of being in the world, be that through having strong spiritual beliefs and understandings and having perhaps a very, what I would call a positive lifestyle, but to other people might seem outside the mainstream, outside the general rule of thumb. For those of us who are empaths, high sensitives, healers, givers, carers, teachers, activists, poets, artists, those of us who are on the fringe of society, I've noticed this recurring pattern in people. And it goes something like this. And I've been to the dentist yesterday, so I feel like I'm talking funny and my mouth is so sore, like my nerves have been drilled and all kinds of stuff. So my mouth is, it just doesn't feel like my own right now, which is kind of interesting. But I have to go back. Oh, dentists are so expensive as well. Anyway, interesting though how talking about self-expression, the throat chakra, the chakras in the mouth, being able to express who we are, and pain and discomfort and dental work, right? So it often looks like you can feel that your family of origin didn't quite accept you. Perhaps you were the scapegoat. Perhaps there was a ridicule, there was criticism. When you expressed yourself in your natural, organic way in childhood and often into adulthood as well, there can be judgment, criticism, resentment for your beliefs, for your choice of work or your way of living your life. Maybe as an empathic child, you chose to be vegetarian or vegan because you didn't want to contribute to the fear, to the violence on the planet, and this was very resented or misunderstood in some shape or fashion. Hang on, I'm just gonna put that blind down because it's actually dazzling my eyes. It's too bright. So the witch wound would speak to how in simultaneous lifetimes, also known as I said, we just call it past lifetimes because the brain likes to think on a linear fashion. Even though they're not past, they're actually concurrent. There's other incarnations going on in other times, in other timelines, dimensions, frequencies, where the same theme can be playing out. So it's like there could be a medieval timeline where you were burnt at the stake for being a witch because you were psychic, because you were able to read people's energy, you were very intuitive. Then there's other lifetimes where you may have spoken out against the political domination, or you may have had strong activist tendencies where you spoke out on behalf of the vulnerable. Those of you who resonate with my work and my channel will be people who are passionate about justice, passionate about speaking up on behalf of ourselves and others who are vulnerable. I've worked for many years in the addiction recovery community because I have a passion for empowering people and helping them to find their own voice, and also being a voice for people who don't feel they have a voice or who feel pushed out on the edge of mainstream society. So this sense of justice and being an activist or a voice for the voiceless will be a strong theme in all your lifetimes and in all your incarnations when you have that cooked and baked into your soul blueprint. So what do we do with this often ingrained witch wound? And I say witch, it doesn't matter if you're male or female or in between, it really doesn't matter. The witch meaning the authentic, wise. The word witch comes from Wicca, which means wise, which means full of wisdom. So the authentic, wise person or divine feminine, masculine, expressing itself in the community as the healer, as the person you turn to. So I would have this in my lifetime now. Like, my mother is very psychic. Even though she'd be very quiet about that, she would be embarrassed about that. She definitely has a strong witch wound going on, because it's something that I can see troubles her. And if she was aware of me even saying this publicly, I think she would just be so she just wouldn't want to publicly announce that she has these psychic gifts, even though from the time I was a child she would share little secret psychic things with me. And throughout my lifetime with her, I would see these gifts in action. I'd see how she's brilliant at helping people. She also worked with special needs and family support. I work with special needs children and young adults as well. So she's actually a brilliant dream weaver, what I would call a dream weaver. She's really good at having prophetic dreams. She would often dream things and then they would come into being. She'd dream about something happening, and I've had this as well, but hers would be, they used to be more frequent. I actually used to have them a lot more as well. I still have the odd prophetic dream. Something, it'll be like, I'll have a vision of the future and then it'll happen and play out a few months later. Or I'm very good at picking up on births and deaths. So I'll often have a dream about that and then that will play out. I'll hear about somebody who's passed, or I'll predict somebody getting pregnant and then shortly after hear that. But my mother's mother and my great-grandmother were what I would call the local witches, even though they wouldn't have been given that title in those times because it wasn't that long ago. But my grandmother on my mother's side was incredibly wise, and she attracted people, and her nickname was the Queen Bee because people would come. She sat in her chair, as we called it, her throne, and she was this big blonde woman who was very, very charismatic and full of she had a chutzpah, right? She had a sass to her. She was great at giving insightful advice, suggestions and care to people. So people with all kinds of troubles and worries and issues would come and speak with her. She was a woman who was way ahead of her time. She didn't fit into the old Irish Catholic way of the woman in the kitchen not having a voice, the man is the head of the household. None of that. She was a matriarch. She was very powerful and she was very loved and very popular. And her mother, my great-grandmother, was to me the definition of the wise woman of the village, the witch. She actually, with no education, no formal education, she delivered babies. She delivered my mother. She delivered my mother's siblings. She delivered babies in the community, and she also washed and dressed the dead. This woman was incredible. God bless you, Josie, she would often be called, the hospitals would send a boy down to knock on her door and say, Mrs. Dixon, you're needed in the hospital. When TB broke out, she was pulled on her black shawl, had no protection against the TB, went into the ward where everybody was dying of TB, which was highly contagious. And she nursed people. Again, she's not an official educated nurse, but just had it organically, had it naturally, had that healer instinct to help others and to nurse and to care and to nourish. And she was also a very, very wise, psychic, in tune lady as well. So this is in my bloodline. This is something that is passed down. It's also on my father's side. I won't go into all that right now. But my point is, there are souls and soul family trees that will carry this persecution complex until a soul decides to face it square on and say, it's time for me to break this, if you want to call it a family curse or a pattern or something on repeat that's not serving my family tree. So I feel that this is a call at this time for those of us who are aware of this witch wound or this persecution complex to face it square on and to decide that we are not going to allow this to continue in our lives. Very much first for yourself, right? Fill up your own cup first and then overflow the love to your descendants or your ancestors. And when you shift and heal this wound, you're healing it backwards and forwards, because healing is not linear. It sends out a ripple in all directions of time and space. So it's like when we heal the present, we also are healing the past. We're healing past versions of ourselves as well as other incarnations, as well as on behalf of the other members of our family tree and of our soul tree. Our soul family, our monad, okay? So how does one do this? Well, a great way to tackle the witch wound is to book a regression therapy session. Those of you are familiar with Dolores Cannon will be very au fait with the quantum healing hypnosis technique, QHHT. I've had a few of those sessions over the years and found them quite beneficial. What I will say is, if you're having a QHHT session, remember, it's all about the healer you're working with. It's about the person who you're interacting with. I would actually say at this stage in my life and with the experiences, I've done loads and loads of healing work. I would say it really is more about the person's energy that you're working with over the even over, I think that trumps the modality. So of course you want to choose a modality that is of interest to you, that feels fitting to your issue. But I would say be very choosy who you allow into your energy field and who you work with. And I've always said this. Don't let anybody willy-nilly go in and work on your energy field. It's something that I think people need to be very aware of. And if you're doing past life, you're going to be going into past lives that are showing up for a reason, right? So the ones you go into are going to be the most intense, the most potent, the most relevant, right? Hopefully relevant to your current life, because I don't see much point in, I mean, you can do it for fun, look back into other lifetimes, but really you're doing this to shift something that's blocking you. If you are somebody, how do you know, right? How do you know that you have this witch wound or this persecution issue in your life? You will feel a lack of support, right? You will feel that, as I said, your family of origin, your community, your friends, maybe in your job, people don't recognize your psychic gifts or your intuitive abilities, or the fact that you're always in giver mode, you're somebody who's a carer, you're taking care of people. You will feel a big red flag that if you have this witch wound will be that you feel persecuted or embarrassed about your natural abilities, you'll actually feel like, I can pick up on the room, I can read people, or I meet somebody and I shake their hand and I get that's something I'll often have. I'll shake someone's hand or give me a hug for the first time, and I'll get a flash of what my connection was to that person in a previous lifetime. And sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not so great. Sometimes it's information that this person has not changed their energy and they're showing up again because something they did in a past life wasn't so great, and it's to see how I handle or they handle the situation this time round. So if you feel embarrassed about your sensitivity, that's a massive red flag that you have this witch wound, and that you were possibly burnt at the stake or drowned or tortured or worse, if you can get worse than that. A lot of these wise women and even men and children in the past, this was something I studied when I was 13. I did paintings about it. I used to paint this flaming red-haired woman getting burnt at the stake, or these crazy paintings of women being destroyed, the personality and the body of that woman being destroyed because of her power and her sense of autonomy and sovereignty. So if you feel uncomfortable about your sense of empowerment, about your sensitivity, the fact that you are a very emotional being, and that things that your tribe, your community tell you shouldn't bother you, you shouldn't have a sensitive reaction to, because it's too sensitive, right? If you constantly were told you're too sensitive, you probably have that persecution complex going on, because it's about you making peace with who you really are. It's about you deciding, I am going to be my authentic self, and if that includes me being a natural emotional being and reacting to life from a sensitive place, so be it. Many people have been desensitized. It's like they got hit with a taser when they were young by being told, put those feelings away, put your emotions away, and don't be so sensitive. And it caused them to neutralize, and not in a good way, but almost like detach and abandon their emotional body. And that can lead to all kinds of problems, especially in our teens, and then again in midlife, or in 30s, 40s, 50s. Those things can come back up if we haven't found a way to resolve them, if we haven't found a way to make peace with our true selves. So if you felt any rejection for your true self, if you felt that your emotional nature was always being told it's too much or it's inaccurate, you may have some other lifetimes where you felt this persecution, where you felt unloved, unwanted, rejected. And having a past life regression therapy session can be very helpful with that, because when we go back to the past life that caused us to abandon that part of ourselves, or to reject it and push it into the shadows, by looking at the actual root of that can have a very healing. It's like by looking at the root of where this all began, the seed of that discontent, it neutralizes in a really positive way the continuation of the feelings or the patterns associated with the pain of that rejection. So there's something about connecting the dots. Now, you don't have to go back into that lifetime and regurgitate it to a point where you're re-traumatized. I mean, a good therapist or a good healer will just give you a glimpse of the roots of the problem, so that you can go, that's why I have this unnecessary feeling of isolation, or that's why I'm afraid of people, that's why I'm afraid of the world, because in so many other simultaneous lifetimes I have not been safe. I didn't feel safe in the world, because when I was out there being myself, I got a hard time about that, or I got in trouble, right? So I would have many memories from my childhood of doing light language. I did light language all the time. I did it on my own, I did it out in the street, I did it climbing trees, I did it with my friends. And I got a lot of criticism, I got a lot of ridicule, I got a lot of, what the hell is that? Like, you're weird, you know, you're making stuff up. Like, I would have always talked to angels. I have vivid memories right the way back, sitting cross-legged in my room, talking to the angels, talking to spirit. My mother is full of stories of how I would tell her what the angels at night around the foot of my bed, that, you know, I wrote a song when I was a kid about these 4 angels up around my bed, and the names in the song were actually great-grandparents and grandparents' names that I wouldn't have known about. So this can cause a lot of fear. Sometimes it startled our parents, or it frightened our family members or friends, because they were like, there's some weird sixth sense thing going on here, I don't understand it. So, you know, we were encouraged to box that away and put it under the bed and never speak about it again, because for some parents it was just too much, too weird, or maybe they actually had it going on as well, but they didn't want you to be criticized, and they didn't want you to face rejection in the world. They didn't want people to label you as weird or strange. So it was sometimes coming from a very loving place, but it didn't help you to tap into those gifts and learn and flesh them out and discipline them, or it caused you to reject that part of yourself, which then was repressed into the shadow. Okay, and the shadow will come up. This spiritual path is not unicorns and California dreams, you know. It's very real, it's very raw, and your shadow is going to resurface at some point in your life, and that's okay. It's supposed to. You're here to do that. But my point here is, if you have the witch wound, now is the lifetime. Now is the time. You're seeing this message for a reason. You can explore that. You don't have to do it through regression therapy, although a lot of people find when they go back to that lifetime or lifetimes where it was significant, it's very beneficial. So I did one recently, and immediately into that lifetime I was being hung. And it was because, and I was only 25, I was the redheaded woman that I had been painting all through my 20s and 30s, right? So that's why I was painting that, because it was a vivid psychic impression in my memory. And it was actually lovely to go, there she is. You know, I could see who I was in that time. And I was being hung because I was very psychic. And I was a herbalist. I was able to read tea leaves, I had runes, I had tarot cards, all that kind of stuff. And I was just, the community were terrified that I had my own mind, I had my own thinking, I was a sovereign being. I wasn't following the patriarchal laws of the time, and I was very free-spirited, out in the meadows and picking the wildflowers, doing my own thing. So, and by the way, like, you'll be surprised how you really feel the emotions when you go back into these lifetimes. Like, I really got upset because I could see my community and how they'd abandoned me, right? And it's been really, really interesting to see how lots of themes in that life have played out and been carried through into this life. So it's a case of if you don't heal it now, you're going to heal it later. So you may as well heal it now and tend to it now. So there's lots of ways you can just book in with a healer and discuss the themes at work in this lifetime and see if you can unravel them together. Or you could do the past life regression, or you can do the QHHT. It just depends on which way you're drawn. But definitely bringing awareness into why you have these feelings of your family not understanding you, or finding it hard to make friends. Like, that's a big one for empaths and light workers, you know. It's like, I feel very isolated, I feel very alone. I hear this all the time from sensitive souls, old souls, blue rays, crystals, indigos, earth angels, because we're not walking around with the vast majority of people who are very asleep and who are not interested in doing the work. We actually came with the intention of doing the work, and we want to tend to those issues and those things. So this is something to think about. It's something I would strongly advise you to explore, because it's going to have a big impact on how you use your natural gifts in this lifetime, and it can shed light on why you are the way you are, or why you're afraid to trust people. So trust issues is another big red flag. And just a word of caution, I'm not a big fan of people doing constant past life regressions. That's not what this is about, okay? You're meant to be present in this life, and you're meant to be present for yourself now. But what I will say is, if you are struggling with this witch wound, you can resolve it quite simply by having a session with a trusted healer, somebody that you feel you resonate with, someone you feel safe with. This is definitely somebody who needs to be highly skilled, many years experience, hands-on experience, and someone that you trust, because it's delicate, it's tender, but it's so worth healing. It's so worth making that shift so that you can say, well, I'm not in that lifetime and I can leave that behind. I'm in this lifetime now, and I'm safe, and I'm in a world where I can speak my mind, and I can have an opinion, and I can also choose the work I do, and I can choose how I express myself. So if you found this helpful, I would really appreciate your kindness by giving this a thumbs up, and I wish you a wonderful day or night wherever you are. Thanks so much. God bless.